I'm Skip Cloverdale.
And I'm Regina Ferguson. For today's breaking story, we will be covering the anticipated death of one of the most renowned authors from the 20th century.
Crocky, EudoraWelty has passed, and at the prehistoric age of 92, first of 3 siblings to have survived, pneumonia had finally found her knocking at death's doorstep on July 23, 2001. I tell you what, Regina, I've almost found myself knocking at the same doorstep.
Oh, that's devastating, Skip.
Yes, ma'am.
Welty was born in Jackson, Mississippi on April 13, 1909. She was predestined for greatness in the literary community, and predestined she was, Skip. She was such a classy lady.
I'm sure she was, Regina. Being born into a family name without prestigious southern roots, her occupation was not expected to go beyond the teaching career of her mother or the insurance cashier career of her father.
When she found her true calling after her line of work in photography, she soared into the history books as the well-established author that we recognize for many of her achievements, including, but not limited to, the Pulitzer Prize, the O. Henry Award for short stories, the National Medal for Literature, and the American Book Award.
I tell you what, Regina, that's about 4 more awards than I've ever won in my life.
Oh, I know, me too, Skip. Welty's treatment of universal themes and her wide-ranging artistic influences clearly cross all regional boundaries.
In other news, Crocky. Regina, you're never going to believe this.
What's that, Skip?
Ladies and gentlemen, you're in for quite a treat. We have some photographs from EudoraWelty.
Yay!
And now we will hand it over to News Team 5 Scott Pendergraft, who will be interviewing college lit professor and EudoraWelty enthusiast Emma Hindenburg. To you, Scott.
Thanks, Skip. So, Mrs. Hindenburg, what can you tell me about EudoraWelty?
I can tell you quite a bit. Can you maybe narrow it down and give me a starting point?
Well, since she was a writer, I think it would probably be best if we started with her writings. Styles.
Well, she was the typical Southern writer, considering her choice of characters and how she makes the readers relate to each one. However, in her short story, A Worn Path, she is atypical in that she deals in depth with the mechanics of the human mind long after it has been worn by multiple hardships and the fatigue of old age.
Okay, wow. So can you give me a brief description on who EudoraWelty was as a person?
Yeah. She was a post-World War II Southern writer who inherited Faulkner's rich legacy. Her childhood was filled with happy memories of her summer lessons in music, art, and reading. That was at a camp near her grandmother's house. In high school, she published 2 poems in National Magazine for Children. The name of the magazine was St. Nicholas. After graduation in 1925, she went on to Mississippi State College for Women and then moved to the University of Wisconsin, where she got a bachelor's in British English literature in 1929. During the Depression, she went home to live with her mother for 2 reasons. First, she could not find a job in New York, and second, her father passed, leaving her mother to live alone in 1931. She traveled to Europe frequently on photography trips. She lived the rest of her life in suburban Jackson. She worked for local Mississippi newspapers and radio stations. She was a publicity agent for 3 years with the Works Progress Administration. Her first published story was Death of a Traveling Salesman. It appeared in Manuscript magazine in 1936. Her first book was A Curtain of Green and Other Stories, published in 1941. I believe Catherine Ann Porter wrote the introduction to that one. Her next work was the novella. The Robber Bridegroom, and then she wrote many years ago on the Mississippi. At her lowest point in 1943, after her third published book, The Wide Net, she received mixed reviews, and it was kind of the lowest point of her career. She received a fan letter that said, "You're doing fine, you're doing all right," and it was signed Faulkner. And she hung it on her office wall for inspiration. She was just such an incredible writer from the very beginning of her career. During the war, she spent some of her time serving the staff of the New York Times Book Review, and that was in 1944. She was the oldest of her two siblings, the only girl. She grew up in the South. Obviously, everything about the South was ingrained in her works. She did have some detachment from her society because she was a first-generation Southerner. Her parents were not from the overt culture of the area where she was raised, therefore she had outside influences that gave her perspective. And just enough objectivity to see the explicit Southern characteristics that litter all of her stories. Her father dealt with photography. She was introduced into the world of the arts at a very young age. I would argue that it gave her the launching pad that she needed for her liberal arts-based career. To wrap it up, she was just an amazing woman who accomplished incredible feats through her lifetime.
Well, thank you so much, Professor. Thank you for your input. I'm sure EudoraWelty would be just so proud to see someone taking so much interest in her life story. So thank you for your interview and for your time. Back to you, Skip.
Yes, thanks, Scott.
Wow, what an informing interview that was. Welty was an enchanting woman. But not only enchanting, she was mysterious. I have a bit of racy information that most people don't know about this woman, who has lived most of her sheltered life in the rural South, caring for her family that all died around her.
What a tragic incident, Regina.
It is tragic. In an interview with her close friend and mentor, Welty stated that at the age of 32, she was still a virgin.
Wow. Divide that number by 8, and you got what I lost my virginity at, Regina.
Oh, you're so racy. The friend replied, "And you always will be to this." But did she remain a virgin? The question lingers.
Regina, you know what else I thought was pretty interesting?
What's that?
During that interview, the letter Faulkner wrote to her at her lowest point.
Faulkner?
Yes.
You mean Faulkner. Our producer, Mr. Team, would be so mad that you messed up his favorite author's name. Faulkner. Faulkner.
With an N.
With an N.
I do say so. I'm sorry, Mr. Team. But potato. Anyway, in other news, yes, Regina, I've heard of the racy things you speak of. Her only relationship was supposedly with her adored friends, John Robinson, to whom Welty dedicated her novel, Delta Wedding.
Yes, Skip, this is precisely what I speak of. But did you know that Robinson was the only man that she ever had romantic attachment to? Then he was said to be homosexual. Quite a crusher, don't you think?
I'll tell you what, Regina. Yes, that is quite a slap in the face to Welty, don't you think?
Indeed. I do think. It's just heartbreaking, really. Now for the shocking news. Welty had a supposed not-so-platonic relationship with a close female friend.
Oh my gosh.
Elizabeth Bowen.
Talk about a spicy lady, don't you think?
When Welty was asked about her risque relationships in many interviews, she answered, "I wasn't brought up to answer questions like that, and I don't think you were either." What a statement from Welty.
Whoa, Regina! That is shocking news. And all of this coming from whom many say is the first Southern lady of literature.
Yes, many do refer to her as that. Looking into her life seems quite sad, but she claims to have always been peaceful and happy.
She does seem sad, doesn't she, Regina? A virgin for most of her life, if not the entirety of her life, taking care of her sick family. but she is an astounding famous author that will never be forgotten from the earliest days working at WPA till 2000, when she was just before her death when she entered into the World's Women's Hall of Fame.
I will say again, what an enchanting woman she was, and in her remembrance we will scroll some footage of Eudora.
Enjoy. Well, Gina, that's all we have today for you, ladies and gents. This is News Team 5 with our daily broadcast.
I'm Regina Ferguson,
And I'm Skip Cloverdale.
reporting from Chattanooga State Community College, where we're working to bring today's top news to you.
You stay classy, Chattanooga.